Have you ever wished there was an easier way to grant and remove temporary access than adding and removing directly from the share button? In today's video, I'm going to show you how to write a script step by step that will automatically grant access to a list of emails you have in Google Sheets and then automatically remove them a specific amount of minutes later. And you can access this all from a single tab in here where you can add emails and select to access, and then a script menu where you can simply click on this and then enter the number of minutes that you would like to grant access. And then once you click OK, it'll automatically add them to the sheet and then automatically add trigger, so it'll remove them automatically at that time. So let's jump right in. So we'll go to extensions and app script and start our coding. So I'm going to call my first function grant access. And then let's go ahead and get the data, so the emails and the access level from our temporary access tab. So we'll do this by doing let ss equal to spreadsheet app and get our active spreadsheet. And then I'll get that tab by using sheet equals to ss.get sheet by name and temporary access like that. And then I can get the data using sheet.getRange 2 and 1 for our starting row and column. And then we want to get up until the last row. And so we'll do this get last row method. And because I'm starting on the second row, I'm going to subtract 1, so I'm not trying to access more than I have. And then we have 2 columns. And then finally, let's go ahead and get the values. So at this point, what we want to do is look through our data and determine based on that if we're adding someone as a editor or as a viewer. And so let's go ahead and iterate through our data, and we'll do this with a simple for loop. And so inside of our for loop, we specify our conditions here inside these parentheses, and we'll start with I equals to 0 because we're going to use I as our placeholder for our iterator. And then semicolon, and then we want to know if we want to continue based on this condition, which is if I is less than how many that we have. So we're going to start with 0, which would be row 1, because in an array it's kind of confusing, but array starts at 0. And so in our data, this would be 0, this would be 1, this would be 2, and so forth. And so as long as our I is less than the number of rows we have, then we want to keep going. And so finally, it's what we want to do at the end of each iteration, which is add 1 to I. And so what this is going to do is I is 0. Is I less than data length? If yes, add 1 to I. All right, and so inside this, what we want to do is if it's edit, we want to add it as an editor. If it's view, we want to add this as a viewer. And so we're going to do a simple if, and then we're going to reference our data here. And then inside a bracket, we're going to use this I to get our row. And then we're going to use another bracket to get our column. So each row in this is going to be something like this, equals to email and then access. And so we want to get this email. And so by that, we're going to use 0, which again is going to be our first item. And actually we want to do 1. We want to check the access. So if access is equal to edit, then we're going to do something. If access is equal to view, we want to do something else. Let's go ahead and get rid of that for now. And so if it's edit, we want to add that email address as an editor. And so we can do this by doing ss.add editor. And then we want that email address. And so this was our access. So we can do that, but we want to change this 1 to 0 to use the email address instead of the access level. And then we can do the same thing down here for viewer. We just want to change this add editor to add viewer. And so this will iterate through our sheet. It'll take each email and see if it's edit or view, and then add them as an editor or viewer to the spreadsheet. That part is great. Now, the only thing we need to do then, if we want to do temporary access, is we need to somehow add a timer to determine when we're going to remove them. And so let's just do something manually just for the moment. And so let's say let access length is equal to 1 minute, for example. And then what we're going to do is we need to basically make a trigger. And so a trigger will run at a specific point. And so you can use triggers like if the spreadsheet is edited, but you can also do timed triggers, which is what we want to do. So what we want to do is figure out what time is a minute from now, and then add a trigger for that time. And so let's say remove time is equal to, and what we're going to do is actually make another function. So let's just call that function, let's say minutes later. And then let's use our access length here. And this makes this very easy to edit, because then if you want to change it to 60 minutes, for example, you can do that just in one spot. And so let's do access length. And then based on that, let's go ahead and do our trigger first. And then let's write our little helper function to determine when we need to add that trigger. So to add the trigger, we're going to use script app and new trigger. And so this new trigger, we want to specify another function. And so we're going to have to write another one, and we're going to call it remove access. And then we want to do, not user calendar, we want to do time based. And then the one we're going to do is at, because we're going to specify a specific time. And so we have our time variable right here, remove time. Let's go ahead and take that. And then let's go ahead, and the final thing to do is create. And so I'll actually create the trigger. So we have two more things we need to do. One is we need to create this minutes later function to figure out our timing. And then we need our remove access function to actually remove access from the ones we just granted. Let's go ahead and start with our minutes later function. And so let's go ahead and add a couple spaces, and we'll do function minutes later. And then we actually need to add something inside these parentheses. So if you've just started, you may have seen these parentheses, not really known what it's about. You can actually put something in here. And so let's just say minutes. And what you can see here is when we called this function, we actually put something inside the parentheses. And so this access length that we define here is going to get passed through to minutes later. So in this minutes later, we need to now get our current time and then add that specific number of minutes to the time and then return it so we can set that trigger for that time. So what we're going to do is, let's say let now in milliseconds is equal to new date. So new date is a JavaScript that gives us a new date for now. So basically it gives us the now. But we want to change this into a time. And so this may give you an idea now in milliseconds, because we need to do some math on it. So what we're going to do is get time returns the store time value in milliseconds. So this is going to change it into a number. And so that number then we can add time to. So let's say this, let's add, what's our add going to be? It's going to be minutes, but we need to turn that minutes into milliseconds. So minutes times 60 seconds in a minute times 1,000 milliseconds in a second. And so this would be add specified minutes here. And then our new time is going to be now plus our add. And so now we have how much we need to add and our current time. And so this new time is now going to be a number, but we need to change this back into a date. And so we can do this using future date, for example, equals to new date. And then inside our new date, we're going to use that new time. And so now we can do this return future date. And so what this will do is calculates the current time in a number, adds our specific number of minutes and milliseconds to that time, and then converts it back into a date and then returns it. And so that returns it means it's going to come back here and get assigned to remove time. So now when we run this, our remove time is going to ping minutes later function with 1 minute, because that's what we have specified in our access length. And it's going to ping back with the current time plus 1 minute. So now we have this all good to go, except for we need our remove access function. So let's go ahead and do that. So function remove access. And now we can do very similar thing here. We can get these variables here. And then we can actually use this for loop and copy that. And what we're going to do here, instead of add editor, we're going to do remove editor and remove viewer. Now, one thing that I like to do, and it's not necessarily needed, but one thing that happens when you run this and you add new triggers is it will add the triggers here, and then as it runs, it's just going to leave the old one here. And so what I like to do is I like to do a little cleanup. You don't have to do this, but if you are a little OCD or you don't want to clutter things up, then this would be a good one to add. So what we're going to do is just a quick scan of our triggers and then delete it if it applied in this case, just so we don't clutter that interface up. And so what we're going to do here is let triggers equals to script app. And we're going to get project triggers, and then we can iterate through those. And so we can do a for loop here again. T equals 0 less than trigger length and T++. And then inside this for loop, we're going to do a simple if statement, and we're going to check each trigger one by one. And so this will get each trigger. And then what we're going to do is get handler function. What handler function means is what function was that trigger assigned to. And so in this case, we're assigned to remove access. So we can do is equal to remove access. So if that is true, then we can delete that trigger. And so the way we do that is script app again, delete trigger. And then the way you do this is you can just use this triggers T. And so that will delete that trigger. All right, perfect. So that will do our trigger cleanup. And so we're going to go ahead and run this now. And then we're going to add two more things before we finish this up. One is an email notification when you give access. And the other thing is going to be adding a menu. So you don't have to run it from the script editor. You can actually run it from here. And so we'll add a custom menu next to help. Let's go ahead and run it now. So let's go ahead and check this. And so if we check our share, there's nobody added right now. And so if we go ahead and run this, it should add them and automatically remove them a minute later. So we're going to click run, and we're going to have to do our permissions real quick. And this is just Google's warning here. So as long as you've done this, then you're good to go. Click advanced, and then we go to grant temporary access. And then here's the permissions asking for. So Google Sheets and this trigger. So allow. And then it'll go ahead and run here. So it's all done. So let's go ahead and check to see if it added them correctly. And sure enough, there they are, editor and viewer. So let's go ahead and check back here. So we should have a trigger now. Oh, and there is the trigger. We check that, you can see specific date and time, and there it is right there. So perfect. So what this should do is in a minute, or a little less than a minute now, it's going to remove those. And so while we're waiting, let's go ahead and add our menu. So we're going to add a new function called onOpen, and this is a Google function that will automatically run every time you open the spreadsheet. So in this, we're going to access the UI so we can add a menu. And so we'll do this using let UI equals spreadsheet app dot get UI, and then UI create menu. And we call it script menu. We call this access menu, whatever you want here. So let's just call it access menu for now. And then add an item. And this will be grant access title. And then we actually need to reference our function. So our function name right here. And so this is the display item, and this is the actual function name. And finally, we can do add to UI. And so perfect, that little script menu will make this show up. And so let's go ahead and check to see what's going on here. And sure enough, those are gone now. And so if we go and check our log, you can see that remove access with time driven ran successfully. And let's check our triggers here. And sure enough, it cleaned up our trigger. So we're looking good. Let's go ahead and run this on open just to make that menu show up. And lo and behold, there it is. So we could do the same thing. One thing I want to show you though is we can actually use a UI inside this grant access. So just like we create this menu, we can actually do a pop-up if you want to enter this one, for example, in that instead of in this script. So let's go ahead and change that. And then the final thing we'll do is add email notifications. So let's get rid of this real quick. And then in here, we want to add a little pop-up and find out how many minutes we want to add. So we're going to use something similar to this. So let's go ahead and grab this. And then what we're going to do is let response equals to UI. And this method, instead of menu, we're going to do a prompt. And so the prompt basically gives us some stuff here. So we could say enter your name. It gives us a little place to enter something. And so we could do here, enter the number of minutes to grant access. And then if you look here, we can do response.get response text to figure out what that is. And so here's what we're going to do is access length is equal to response.get response text. And so let's go ahead and run this, and then let's look at adding the email functionality or sending notifications. So at this point, let's go ahead and run this here and enter the number of minutes to grant access. And so in here, we could do 1 like we have been doing and click OK and finish script. So there it is, added them again. Let's just double check this to make sure everything's working okay there. So check our triggers, and there is our trigger. So looks like we're all running fine. And so let's last of all look at adding our email notifications, and then we'll double check to make sure that finished successfully again. So what we're going to do in here is we're just going to add a couple lines, and then when we add an editor or add a viewer, we want to send them a little notification. So we're just going to use a mail app method. It's a little more restricted than Gmail app, so it keeps it a little safer. So unless you need Gmail app for something else, I'd recommend using mail app. And then what we're going to do is inside this, there's a couple of ways you can do this. The way I like doing it is this way, because it allows us to use some HTML to make it look a little cleaner. So the simple method is just email, subject, and body. But we're going to do a bracket and an object, and inside this object we have to assign each one. So 2 would be our email, and so our email address is right here. And then we need subject, and then we need HTML body. And so this is what we need to populate our email. So let's go ahead and change these into backticks. So backticks are by the tilde or right above the tab on most keyboards. And what it allows us to do is template literals, which are a $sign and 2 curly braces. And this allows you to put a variable inside this. So we have our email address here. Our subject here could be, you have been given access to. And so in this case, we might want to use this spreadsheet name. So we can do this by ss.getName. So that's perfect for the subject. And then in the body, maybe you want to repeat this. Then we probably would like to add a link to the spreadsheet. Now, some of you may be wondering, what about the built-in method when you share and you can check to send them an email notification? So you can do that in here using the Drive service, but it's a lot more complicated method. And so this is a much easier way to explain, especially if all you need to do is send this notification. So what we're going to do here then is let's make a link. And so in HTML, we're going to use a href, and then we'll do our closing tag there. And so in HTML, this would be where the link goes, and this is our text. So we could say click here, for example, And then we need that spreadsheet link. So we're going to actually do a modification of our spreadsheet name. And instead of name, we're going to do get URL. And so we could add a new line, for example, in here using BR tag. And then this will show up as you've been given access to the spreadsheet name. Click here, and we can say maybe click here to view sheet or something like that, or Google Sheet or whatever it is. We could even add the name again if you want. And then you can be like, click here to view the Google Sheets Grant Temp access. All right, so that will do that. So at this point, however, we're just running this inside this if statement. And so there's two things we could do. One is we could just copy and paste this and put it inside the edit and view. Another thing we could do is we could say if data I1 is equal to view, or if it's equal to edit, and put it inside here. And so that's probably a better solution unless you want a slightly different email for each one. And so this is probably a little cleaner method. Otherwise, you could put this inside each one of these and get rid of this entirely. So it's up to you, depending upon if you want those emails to be the same or different, depending upon if they're editor or viewer. All right, so that is it for this one. Let's go ahead and make sure that those people have been removed, and sure enough, they have. So we've now created a script that will run directly from the Google Sheet, and you can enter the number of minutes that you want to give access. So you could do it for a minute, you could do it for 60 minutes, you could do it for a couple of days. And so if you wanted to change this and you don't want to enter in minutes, you want to enter in hours, for example, down here, you could change this from minutes to hours. And basically all you have to do is times 60 to change the minutes or the hours into minutes. And so that's all you'd have to do. And then you could run this on hours instead of minutes. And you can grant access for 1 to 5 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours. And then again, if you want to do it in days, you could do that as well. And so if you want to do days, for example, so this would be hours. And if you want to do days, you do 24 hours in a day. If I can get my fingers to do it the right way. So this would be days times 24 hours in a day times 60 hours or 60 minutes in an hour times 60 seconds in a minute and 1,000 milliseconds. So that just gives you an idea of how to modify that. So we'll reset it to minutes for now. But I just want to show you that in case you don't want to use it in minute increments. So that is it for today's video. Make sure to check out our other videos for more tutorials on both Google Sheets and AppScript. And as always, have a great day.